I helped an alien warrior woman escape the arena. I was speechless when I found out who she was. Carter had always known that life in the outer colonies of the galaxy was dangerous, but he never imagined he'd find himself in a place like Karos. The planet was known for one thing above all: its brutal gladiator arenas. Powerful warriors from every corner of the universe were captured and forced to fight for the entertainment of the planet's rulers, and for years, Carter had been working on the mining crew that served them. Life was hard, and Carter had never been one to complain. He did his job, kept his head down, and stayed out of trouble. That was until he saw her. The first time Carter laid eyes on Kara, she was in the arena, her sleek alien body moving with fluidity and grace. The crowd roared as the alien warriors clashed, their weapons ringing in the air with each strike. The noise was deafening, but Carter's attention was solely on her. She wasn't like the others. She didn't just fight to survive. She fought with purpose, with an intensity that made her a force to be reckoned with. Her skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and her long hair flowed like a dark river behind her. Her eyes, bright and sharp, seemed to cut through the chaos around her, focusing only on her opponents. The other fighters, humans, aliens, and creatures from distant planets, were no match for her speed and strength. She was a warrior unlike any Carter had ever seen. Carter wasn't the type to get involved in the political struggles of the galaxy. He wasn't a soldier, and he certainly wasn't a hero. But as he watched Kara, something inside him stirred. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he had to help her. There was something in her eyes that called to him, something that told him she wasn't just another prisoner in the arena. She was special. The night after the fight, Carter found himself back in the dusty, dimly lit barracks of the mining crew. His mind was still on Kara, the way she moved, the way she fought. It wasn't just her skill, it was her spirit. She wasn't just fighting to win, she was fighting for something more. Carter couldn't help but think about the life she must have lived, the people she must have once known. Who was she, and how had she ended up in the arena? The answer came the next day. Carter overheard some of the higher-ranking officers in the mess hall talking about her. They called her Kara, the last of a noble warrior tribe that had once ruled a powerful star system. Her capture was no accident. The rulers of Karos had been hunting her for years, hoping to break her and use her as a symbol of dominance over her people. They knew that if they could defeat her in the arena, they could crush the morale of any who might rise up against them. But from what Carter had seen, Kara wasn't broken. Not yet. The thought of her being used as a pawn in this cruel game filled him with a sense of outrage. He had always known that the people in charge of the arena didn't care about the lives of those who fought for their amusement. But to hear that Kara's suffering was part of a greater plan, it made his blood boil. That night, Carter lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the sounds of the arena still echoing in his ears. He couldn't stop thinking about Kara, her face, her strength, her fierce spirit. It was all he could think about. And then it hit him: she needed to escape. Someone needed to help her, and if no one else would, then maybe he could. The plan formed in his mind quickly, fueled by a mix of desperation and determination. He knew it would be dangerous, but Carter had always been good at getting into places where he didn't belong. He had to get past the guards, past the security systems, and into the heart of the arena's holding cells. He had no idea what he would find there, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Kara's fate was tied to his in some way. The next day, Carter made his move. He knew the guards would be distracted during the midday meal, and that was when he would strike. He slipped through the corridors, avoiding the watchful eyes of the soldiers and security drones that patrolled the facility. His heart raced as he approached the locked doors of the prisoner cells, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle over him. What was he doing? He was just a miner, a regular human. He didn't belong in this fight. But then he thought of Kara, the look in her eyes, the way she fought with everything she had, and the doubt melted away. She deserved a chance to be free. She deserved more than the life the arena had sentenced her to, and if no one else would fight for her, then he would. Carter found the keycard he needed to unlock the door, swiping it across the terminal with shaking hands. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit room. Inside, Kara lay on a cot, her body battered and bruised from the fight the day before. She was unconscious, but Carter could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. She was alive. The sight of her, so vulnerable, made something stir in his chest. He had been prepared for a cold, calculated escape, but seeing Kara like this, so human, so fragile, made him realize just how much he was risking. He had no idea how to help her, how to get her out of this place, but he knew he couldn't leave her behind. He gently shook her shoulder, his voice barely above a whisper. "Kara, wake up, it's time to go." Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she just stared at him, her expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. She looked like she might lash out, but then something in her gaze softened. She didn't recognize him, but somehow she knew he wasn't here to harm her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse but strong. I'm someone who wants to help you," Carter replied. "I've come to get you out of here." Kara's eyes narrowed, studying him carefully. "You're human. Why would you risk your life for me?" Carter didn't have an answer, at least not a good one. He could have said something about justice, about freedom, but he didn't. He just shrugged. "I don't know, but I know you don't belong here, and I'm not leaving you to die in this place." She didn't argue. Instead, she slowly pushed herself up, wincing from the pain in her body. Carter reached out to steady her, and for the first time he felt the weight of her strength, the power that lay beneath her fragile exterior. She was a warrior, and though she had been beaten down, her spirit remained unbroken. "We don't have much time," Carter said. "The guards will be back soon." Kara nodded, her expression hardening. "Lead the way." Together, they moved quietly through the facility, avoiding the guards and the security systems that had been put in place to keep prisoners like Kara contained. Carter's heart pounded in his chest as they made their way through the labyrinthine hallways. They reached the outer gates of the complex, but as they neared the exit, disaster struck. A squad of guards appeared from nowhere, blocking their path. Carter cursed under his breath, knowing they were trapped. Kara stood beside him, her eyes blazing with fury. "We'll fight," she said, her voice calm but determined. "No," Carter said quickly, "we run." But Kara was already in motion. She spun around, her powerful body moving like a blur as she took on the guards with precision and skill. Carter hesitated for a moment, but then he joined her, doing his best to hold his own. It wasn't long before they fought their way past the guards, forcing open the gates and escaping into the night. As they ran through the dark streets of the city, Carter couldn't help but look back at the arena. It had been just a building, a place of pain and suffering. But now, as he ran beside Kara, he realized that he had done something he never thought possible. He had helped her escape. But what came next, he didn't know. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, he wasn't just a spectator. He was part of something bigger. And he would fight to the end to make sure Kara, the warrior who had been a prisoner, would never be chained again. After escaping the arena, Carter and Kara found themselves in the shadows of a world they didn't understand, though it was the only world they knew. The city of Kairos was vast, with towering buildings stretching into the skies, lit by neon signs that cast a cold, artificial glow over the streets. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, a far cry from the open spaces Carter was used to on the mining colony. Kara, despite the weariness in her eyes and the pain from her wounds, moved with purpose. Her warrior's instincts never dulled, and she guided them through the dark streets with an unwavering confidence. Carter followed closely behind, trying to stay as quiet as possible. He was out of his depth, a human in a strange world, trying to help an alien warrior escape a system far more dangerous than anything he'd faced before. They stopped only once, ducking into an alley to catch their breath. Carter turned to Kara, his voice low and cautious. "Where are we going? What now?" Kara's expression was unreadable, but there was a certain sadness in her eyes. "I have to find the others, the resistance." She paused, glancing around the alley as if the walls themselves might be listening. "There are people here who want to free my people. We just have to reach them before they reach us." Carter frowned, trying to wrap his mind around the gravity of the situation. "And then what? Do you have a plan?" "Plans don't always survive the first contact with the enemy," Kara said with a bitter smile. "But I know what I have to do. We can't run forever. Eventually, they'll send more than just a few guards after us. I'll need allies if I'm to take back what's mine." "Your people," Carter muttered. "Your throne." Kara's gaze hardened, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her blade. "I am not some princess waiting to be rescued. I am a warrior, and I'll fight for my people even if it costs me everything." Carter nodded, though doubt lingered in his chest. He had no experience with warfare, no understanding of what Kara's people had lost or what it would take to bring them back from the edge of destruction. He was just a miner, a man with a small life in a big galaxy. But now, somehow, he was a part of something much larger, and he couldn't walk away from that. Their journey took them deeper into the underbelly of Kairos. They passed through crowded streets filled with the chatter of alien merchants, traders peddling strange and dangerous goods, and residents from all walks of life. Some gave them curious glances, others simply ignored them. The city was a place of survival, where the strong thrived and the weak faded into the background. Kara moved with quiet intensity, keeping her distance from the crowds. Carter couldn't help but notice the way people seemed to part for her, as if they could sense the power in her presence. She was different from the others. There was a weight to her, a history that even Carter could feel, though he didn't fully understand it. After hours of navigating the maze of streets, they finally arrived at a hidden base, tucked away beneath the city's surface. The entrance was cleverly concealed, a small door in the side of a rundown building. Kara pressed a hidden button on the wall, and a narrow passageway opened before them. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of metal and dust, but it felt like a safe haven compared to the streets above. Carter hesitated at the threshold. This was no longer just an escape. It was a step into something bigger, something dangerous. But Kara didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her movements confident and purposeful. Carter followed, though his mind was still racing with questions. The underground base was quiet, dimly lit by flickering lights and the soft hum of machinery. They passed through narrow corridors before coming to a large room filled with a mix of alien species. Some were armed, others were deep in conversation, but all of them paused when they saw Kara. There was a palpable shift in the room as they recognized her. A tall, reptilian man with sharp green scales and bright yellow eyes approached them. His voice was low and gravelly as he spoke. "Kara," he said, his tone respectful, "you're alive." Kara didn't smile, but her posture softened slightly. "For now, I need your help," the man nodded. "You know we'll fight for you. The resistance has been waiting for this day." Kara glanced at Carter, then back at the man. "This is Carter. He helped me escape. He's with us." The man eyed Carter for a long moment, sizing him up. Then, without another word, he nodded. "You've made a brave choice, human, but be warned, the path ahead is dangerous. It's not just the rulers of Kairos who will be after you. There are other forces at play here, and they won't stop until they have Kara back in their grip." Carter swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I didn't sign up for any of this," he muttered under his breath. Kara, hearing him, gave him a knowing look. "You didn't need to, but you're in this now, and I'll make sure you don't regret it." For the first time, Carter realized the weight of her words. He wasn't just a bystander in this war. He was an active participant, whether he liked it or not. The resistance, Kara's cause, was now his cause. The stakes were higher than anything he'd ever imagined. The room quieted as a few more figures entered, each one more intimidating than the last. One was a hulking alien with 4 arms, each one thicker than Carter's waist. Another was a smaller, wiry creature with bright red skin and sharp, pointed teeth. The last was a woman, her features cold and regal, her eyes a piercing blue that seemed to see right through him. Kara nodded at them, her expression serious. "These are my closest allies. Together we'll take back what's mine, and we'll make Kairos pay for what they've done." The alien woman stepped forward, her voice cold but steady. "We've been preparing for this moment for years. But we must move carefully. The rulers of Kairos won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Kara's eyes narrowed. "Then we destroy them first." Carter was silent, his mind racing with the implications of her words. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but something deep inside him knew that there was no turning back now. He had chosen to help Kara, and in doing so, he had chosen a side. A side that was about to face a war far larger than he could have ever imagined. Over the next few days, Carter was trained in the ways of the resistance. It wasn't much, just enough to keep him from getting in the way, but it was enough to show him how dangerous this world really was. He learned to use a few basic weapons, how to avoid detection, and how to blend in with the different species that populated the resistance. Kara, though still recovering from her injuries, threw herself into her role as a leader. She wasn't just a fighter, she was a strategist, always thinking several steps ahead. Carter watched her in awe as she made decisions with calm precision, organizing her allies and preparing for the inevitable conflict ahead. One night, as they sat around a small fire in the underground base, Kara turned to Carter, her expression softening for the first time. "You don't have to stay," she said quietly. "This isn't your fight. You could walk away." Carter looked at her, the flames flickering in his eyes. I can't. You've shown me a side of this galaxy I never knew existed. You need help, Kara, and I'm not going to leave you now. For a brief moment, Kara's gaze softened and she seemed almost grateful. Then stay. Fight with me, I'll need all the allies I can get. And with that, Carter made his choice. He would stay. He would fight. And whatever came next, he knew one thing for sure. The fight for Kara's freedom was just beginning. Carter had always thought of himself as a practical man. He didn't go looking for trouble, and he certainly didn't want to get involved in any kind of rebellion. But here he was, deep underground in a hidden resistance base, facing challenges he never thought he'd encounter. And despite the fear that sometimes crept up on him, there was also a strange sense of purpose. He had stayed because of Kara, the warrior woman he had helped escape the arena, whose story had become far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. She wasn't just an escaped prisoner or a pawn in a galactic game of power. Kara was a leader, a force, and the future of an entire people. That much was clear to Carter now. She wasn't asking him to be her savior. She was asking him to stand beside her as an equal. And that's what he intended to do. Over the next few days, Carter found himself immersed in the world of the resistance. The training was harsh, though not as difficult as the life he had known on the mining colony. Still, there was a certain kind of strength he needed to build, both physical and mental. The resistance wasn't just a group of rebels fighting to take back a throne. They were fighters, strategists, and survivors, and Carter had to become one of them quickly. Kara was always around, her presence a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. She was still healing from her injuries, but that didn't stop her from taking charge. Even though she wore the weight of her people's past on her shoulders, she moved with the same confidence and power she had shown in the arena. Watching her, Carter couldn't help but wonder how she had survived all these years of imprisonment and torment. Her will was unbreakable. One afternoon, Kara and Carter sat in a quiet corner of the base, looking over maps of the city. The resistance had been gathering intelligence, and it seemed that the time was drawing closer for a direct attack. Kara traced her finger along the map, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We move tomorrow," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with determination. "The rulers of Karos will never expect us to strike this soon. They've underestimated us for too long. It's time we showed them that we're not just a handful of rebels. We are the future." Carter nodded, though his stomach tightened with a mix of excitement and dread. The resistance had been planning this for months, but he hadn't expected things to move so quickly. He had known that action was inevitable, but now, as the day of the attack grew nearer, the weight of it all sank in. He had no idea what to expect. He was a miner, not a soldier. He wasn't sure he even understood the full scope of the war they were about to start. "Are you ready?" Kara asked, her gaze lifting from the map to meet his. He looked at her, his heart racing. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I'll do my best." "That's all I can ask for," Kara said with a faint smile, though her eyes remained serious. "Tomorrow, we take the city." The next day came too quickly. It started before the sun had even risen, with everyone in the base moving in a frenzy. The air was thick with tension. Weapons were checked, supplies were packed, and every member of the resistance had their assignment. Carter had been given a simple task: infiltrate the enemy's stronghold and find an access point for Kara and the rest of the resistance. It was a simple job, but it was critical. If he failed, everything could fall apart before they even got started. As the group prepared to leave, Kara pulled Carter aside. "Stick to the plan, don't get caught. If you do, it could cost us everything." Carter nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "I won't let you down." Kara's gaze softened for a moment, and Carter noticed a flicker of something, gratitude, maybe, or trust, before she turned to join the others. It was the first time he had seen her show any vulnerability, but even that was fleeting. She was a leader, and leaders couldn't afford to show weakness. The group split into smaller teams, each assigned different parts of the city to sabotage. Carter's team, led by Kara's trusted second-in-command, was tasked with getting to the central communications hub. It was heavily guarded, but Carter had been briefed on a series of backdoors and underground tunnels that would allow them to bypass most of the security. The streets of Karos were bustling with activity as they moved through the city, blending in with the crowd. There was an underlying sense of urgency in the air, but Carter couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was impossible to know if the enemy had spies in the city, but the tension was palpable. He kept his head down, trying to avoid drawing attention to himself. As they neared the outskirts of the city, Carter's heart began to race. The comms hub was just ahead, and with it, the real challenge would begin. The team paused in the shadows, scanning the area for any signs of enemy patrols. Carter's fingers tightened around the weapon at his side. He had no idea how to use it well, but he was ready to fight if he had to. "Stay close," the leader of the team whispered. "We move in 10 minutes." The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Carter's nerves were on edge, his mind replaying every possible scenario. He tried to push aside the fear and focus on the task at hand. This wasn't about him. This was about Kara, about the future of her people. This was bigger than anything he had ever faced. The signal came, and the team moved swiftly. They slipped into the building's underground entrance, avoiding the main security checkpoints. The tunnels were dim and narrow, and Carter's mind raced as they made their way deeper into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. There were no sounds except the soft clink of their boots on the metal floor and the occasional rustle of their clothing. They reached a junction where the path split into two. Carter's team hesitated, unsure of which direction to take. A faint sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. The group quickly pressed against the wall, holding their breath. A pair of guards walked past them, unaware of their presence. Carter's heart was pounding, and he could feel the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. After what felt like an eternity, the guards were gone. They continued down the path, moving as silently as they could. Carter couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. He was part of something important now. This wasn't just a mission, this was a chance to make a difference. They reached the comms hub without incident. The doors were locked, but Carter's heart sank as he realized that the security systems inside were more advanced than he had anticipated. They would need to disable the security measures before they could proceed. The seconds felt like hours as the team worked to break through the system, each moment stretching into an agonizing wait. Finally, the door clicked open. Inside, the room was filled with consoles, screens flashing with information. Carter's job was to find the control panel that would allow Kara's team to access the comm system and broadcast their message. It was all going according to plan until the alarm sounded. A high-pitched, shrill noise pierced the air, signaling that they had been detected. The enemy had found them. "Move!" the leader shouted. Carter's pulse spiked as he sprinted toward the control panel, his mind blanking out everything except the task at hand. The alarms were deafening now, the sound echoing off the walls. He slammed his fist down on the panel, desperate to disable the system before it was too late. But just as his fingers touched the controls, the door to the comms room exploded open. Soldiers poured into the room, their weapons aimed at Carter and the team. "Get down!" the leader shouted, pushing Carter to the ground. Carter hit the floor with a crash, the sound of blaster fire filling his ears. He scrambled to his feet, barely managing to avoid a shot that singed the air beside him. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked for a way out. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. Kara had said the resistance wasn't just a handful of rebels. But now, as the chaos unfolded around him, Carter wondered if they had underestimated the enemy. If they didn't make it out of here alive, the mission would be a failure, and they would all be lost. The sound of blaster fire echoed in Carter's ears, drowning out all other thoughts. His heart raced, adrenaline flooding his system as he scrambled to get out of the way of the enemy soldiers who had burst into the comms room. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow as he glanced around, looking for an escape route, but there was none. The soldiers had them cornered. Carter's hand went instinctively to his sidearm, a weapon he had only just learned to use. He fumbled with it, trying to make sense of the controls, but the panic clawed at him. He had never been in a real firefight before, never had to fight for his life in a way that actually mattered. His entire existence had been one of routine and predictability, but this was different. This was war. "Get down!" the team leader shouted, pulling Carter to the floor just as a shot streaked overhead, narrowly missing them. The blaster fire hit the consoles behind them, sending sparks flying and filling the air with the acrid smell of burning circuits. Carter hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his shoulder, but he barely registered it. His mind was focused on one thing: survival. He had to keep moving, keep thinking. He couldn't let them get caught. Not now, not after everything they had been through. Kara's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to fall back," she shouted, her voice as commanding as ever. We can't win this fight, not here. Carter turned toward her, finding her in the midst of the chaos, already trying to lead the group to safety. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a leader, and in that moment, he understood what it meant to follow someone who had true authority. He could see it in the way she moved, the way she kept her cool even in the face of danger. But even Kara couldn't fight an entire army on her own. "We've got to move," the team leader barked again, pulling Carter to his feet. "Get to the exit, now!" The group began to retreat, darting for cover behind the consoles. The enemy soldiers were closing in, their boots clanging on the metal floors as they moved in formation, guns aimed in all directions. Carter's heart pounded as they ran through the narrow corridors of the facility. He didn't know where they were going, but he couldn't stop moving. He had to trust Kara. He had to trust the resistance. They reached a maintenance tunnel at the back of the building, an escape route they had planned for this very situation. It wasn't much, just a narrow shaft that led out into the city's underbelly, but it was their best chance. Carter felt a surge of relief as they ducked inside, away from the blaster fire. "We're not out of the woods yet," Kara said, her voice grim. "We need to move fast. The enemy will be tracking us." The tunnel was dark and claustrophobic, the air thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. The team moved quickly, single file, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps and the occasional scrape of metal against stone. Carter's mind raced as they moved through the darkness. How had things gone so wrong? They were supposed to strike quickly, sabotage the comms, and get out. But now they were on the run, hunted by the very people they were trying to overthrow. "Keep moving," the team leader urged, glancing over his shoulder. "We've got about an hour before the alarm reaches full lockdown. After that, this whole area will be crawling with soldiers. If we don't make it out of here by then, we're done." The pressure was on. Carter could feel it in his bones, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had never been a fighter, never been a soldier, but this was his reality now. He couldn't turn back. Not after everything he had seen. Not after everything they had lost. The group continued through the maze of tunnels, each step taking them farther from the danger of the facility. But Carter could feel the fear building inside him. What if they didn't make it? What if they were caught? What would happen to Kara, to the resistance? He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let it happen. After what seemed like hours, they emerged from the tunnel into a small, dilapidated building on the outskirts of the city. The place was abandoned, the windows boarded up, but it provided some temporary cover. The team leader checked his data pad, his expression tense. "We've got about 15 minutes before the enemy sends a full search party after us. We need to move again fast." Carter's legs were sore from the long run through the tunnels, but he forced himself to stand. The weight of the weapon at his side felt heavier now, a constant reminder that there was no turning back. He looked at Kara, who stood by the window, her eyes scanning the street outside. "We'll be okay," she said, though her voice lacked the usual confidence. Even she could feel the weight of what they were about to do. "But we need to be smart. If we're going to survive this, we have to be smarter than they are." Carter nodded, his throat tight. "What's the plan?" Kara turned to him, her gaze steady. "We're heading to the outskirts of the city. There's a safe house there, a place we can regroup. Once we're there, we can figure out our next move. But we can't stay here. We need to keep moving." The plan was simple, but Carter wasn't sure it would work. The enemy was already on high alert, and every second they wasted meant more risk. But he didn't have any better ideas. He just had to trust Kara. She had been leading them this far. She would lead them through this. They left the building, moving quickly through the empty streets. The city, once bustling with life, now felt empty and oppressive. The silence was unsettling. It was as though the whole city was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. As they moved, Carter's thoughts drifted to the resistance, to what they were fighting for. Kara's people, her tribe, had been enslaved and oppressed by the rulers of Kairos for far too long. But it wasn't just her people they were fighting for. It was everyone who had been silenced, controlled, and oppressed by those in power. The galaxy was full of people like Kara, people who had been treated as less than nothing. And now they were standing up, fighting for their freedom. It was a battle bigger than any one person, any one fight. It was a battle for the future. They reached the safe house just as the first signs of enemy patrols began to appear on the horizon. The house was a small, nondescript building tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It was nothing special, but it was enough to provide them with a temporary refuge. Inside, the team took a moment to catch their breath, the tension slowly easing. But even in the safety of the small room, the fear never quite went away. They knew the enemy was closing in. They knew that every minute they spent here brought them closer to being discovered. Kara looked at her team, her expression determined. "We've made it this far, but the fight isn't over. We'll regroup here, then we move again. This war won't be won in a day, but we have to keep pushing. We can't stop, not now." Carter watched her as she spoke, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about being ready. It was about being brave enough to keep going, no matter how impossible it seemed. As the group settled in, Carter took a moment to reflect. He had come so far from the quiet life he once knew. His heart still raced with the uncertainty of what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to back down, not when the stakes were this high. Not when so many people were counting on them. The days that followed their escape from the comms hub were filled with uncertainty. Each new dawn brought with it a renewed sense of urgency. They had made it to the safe house, but the enemy was closing in. Carter knew that every move they made from here on out would be crucial. Every decision, every step, could be the difference between survival and capture. Kara, ever the leader, didn't show fear. She kept her focus sharp, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, analyzing every piece of information they gathered. Even in the quiet moments when everyone else was catching their breath or tending to wounds, she was always thinking ahead. Carter admired her for that. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for an entire people, for a cause greater than anyone could imagine. But even Kara couldn't keep the weight of the situation from showing. She was tired. The constant strain of leadership, the pressure of making the right decisions, was beginning to wear on her. Carter could see it in the subtle way her shoulders drooped, in the way her gaze lingered on the maps and plans laid out in front of her, as if searching for answers that weren't there. One evening, as the team gathered to discuss their next move, Kara turned to Carter. Her expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps trust, behind her eyes. "You've been with us for a while now," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I know you didn't sign up for this. You didn't ask to be part of a war, but you're still here. Why?" Carter hesitated for a moment. The question caught him off guard. Why had he stayed? He could have left, could have gone back to the mining colony, to a life that was familiar and safe. He could have turned his back on the danger and chaos that surrounded them. But something had kept him here. "I guess I couldn't walk away," he finally said, his voice quiet. "I've seen too much, and I don't know, it just feels like this is the right thing to do. Maybe I'm not a soldier, but I can't just sit back and watch while people like you fight for a future." Kara looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "I understand. You don't have to be a soldier to fight. Sometimes it's just about doing what's right." Carter felt a weight lift off his chest at her words. In a way, he had been questioning himself, unsure of whether he truly belonged in this fight. But Kara's acknowledgement gave him something he hadn't realized he needed: validation. He was part of something bigger. He had a role to play, even if it wasn't the role he had envisioned for himself. The next day, the resistance moved out once again. The safe house was no longer safe, not with the enemy closing in. It was time to hit back, to take the fight to the rulers of Karos. The team had been preparing for this moment, gathering resources, strategizing, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Kara had a plan. It was risky, but it was their best shot. The enemy's leadership was centralized in the city's Capitol building. If they could infiltrate the building, they could cripple the command structure, sending the enemy into chaos. The resistance would have a chance to take control, to start the process of freeing Kara's people from their chains. Carter felt a surge of anxiety as he thought about the Capitol building. It was heavily guarded, the heart of the enemy's power. If they failed, it could mean the end of everything they had fought for, but he knew they didn't have any other options. They had to take the risk. The group traveled by night, avoiding the main streets and sticking to the shadows. The city was a maze of alleys and hidden pathways, and Kara seemed to know every turn, every shortcut. They moved like ghosts through the urban sprawl, slipping past patrols and security checkpoints. Carter's nerves were on edge, his senses heightened by the fear and the thrill of what they were about to do. When they reached the Capitol building, Carter felt his heart pound in his chest. The building loomed ahead, its sleek, imposing structure standing like a fortress in the heart of the city. Guards lined the perimeter, and automated turrets scanned the area, looking for any signs of movement. Kara signaled for the team to halt. She studied the building for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she took in the security. "We need to get past the outer defenses first," she said softly. "Once we're inside, we can disable the main power grid. That will give us a window to get to the leadership chambers." Carter nodded, his fingers tightening around his weapon. It was time to act. They made their move quickly, darting from one hiding spot to another, using the cover of darkness to slip past the guards and security drones. Carter could feel the tension in the air, the pressure of the mission weighing heavily on him. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. Finally, they reached the main entrance, a massive set of steel doors guarded by 2 armed soldiers. Kara didn't hesitate. She signaled for the team to prepare, and they moved into position. In a flash, they were upon the guards. Kara was the first to strike, her movements swift and precise. She took down the first guard with a well-placed blow to the neck, rendering him unconscious before he even had time to react. Carter followed suit, his heart pounding as he fought his way through the second guard. He didn't know how, but he did it. He managed to knock the soldier off balance, using the same moves Kara had shown him during their training. With the guards incapacitated, they quickly moved inside, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Carter's mind was racing. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for, but it wasn't over yet. There was still much to be done. The team split up, heading in different directions to disable the security systems. Carter was with Kara, moving toward the central control room where the power grid was located. The building felt deserted, almost too quiet. They reached the control room without incident, and Kara quickly set to work, hacking into the system to shut down the building's power. "5 minutes," Kara murmured as she worked. "Stay alert." Carter stood guard, his senses on high alert. He kept his eyes on the door, his grip tight on his weapon. Every sound seemed magnified in the silence. Footsteps in the distance, the hum of the building's air conditioning, the occasional click of a security camera shifting its position. He knew they were running out of time. Finally, the power grid shut down with a soft beep. The building was plunged into darkness. "We're in," Kara said, her voice calm. "Let's move." They headed deeper into the building, toward the leadership chambers. Carter's nerves were on edge. The closer they got, the more he could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They weren't just infiltrating a building. They were taking a stand against an entire empire. They reached the leadership chambers and found the enemy commanders inside. The room was large, filled with sleek, modern furniture and high-tech consoles. The leaders of Kairos were seated around a large table, caught off guard by the sudden blackout. They had no idea that the resistance had infiltrated the heart of their power. Kara stepped forward, her voice ringing out with authority. "Your reign is over." The enemy commanders stood, shocked and confused, but there was no time for negotiations. The resistance was already in motion, and their plan was already set into motion. Carter stood beside Kara, his heart pounding. This was it. They were at the tipping point. What happened next would decide the future of Kara's people and the galaxy. As the enemy leaders scrambled, realizing that they were outmatched, Carter felt a sense of resolve wash over him. They had come so far, had fought so hard. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened, they would make sure this fight was worth it. Kara stepped forward, her hand steady as she raised her weapon. The enemy commanders froze, their eyes wide with fear. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The fate of an empire hung in the balance. And then, with a single motion, the first blow was struck. The resistance had begun their final stand.